I love talking with women. And over the years, what's really become a passion of mine is menopause and perimenopausal care.
I'm Jill Angelo, host of the Gynecologists podcast series for women's health in midlife. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the health and wellness industries. These experts are helping women 40 plus feel confident and in control of their health in the most vibrant years of their lives. So join us on this journey of women's health. There's a shortage of OB-GYNs in the United States, and the gap is growing. What are the ramifications of that shortage? I wanted to know more. In this podcast, I talk with Gynecologists Director of Health and OB-GYN, Dr. Rebecca Dunsmoor-Su, about how that shortage directly affects women's health, how so many women in menopause are already lacking the care they need, and how Gynecologists is answering that call and helping to fill the gap for women in midlife and menopause.
A June 2018 article in Fortune claims that by 2020, the U.S. will be short 8,800 OB-GYNs. Why is that a problem?
So I think that's a problem for a couple of reasons. OB-GYN training is focused specifically on women's health, and it's focused on all aspects of women's health from really adolescence through to old age. And there is no other specialty where women's health is the primary focus, where that is all we learn. And so for women, OB-GYNs are key during the years of puberty. They're key for birth control provision. They're key for childbirth, and they're key for managing GYN concerns through adulthood and through menopause. And really, menopause is a key time in the life of a woman, and OB-GYNs are the ones best trained to help a woman through that time of life, whether it be with advice or whether it be with medication, whatever that is. So it's a problem that a good portion of women in this country really won't have access to these women's health specialists. I know that primary care doctors do provide some of this care for women, and they do a good job within what they can do, but they have so many other things that they need to focus on. And I feel like, there are times when you just need a specialist, and women deserve to have a specialist, just like men deserve to have a specialist. Nobody's talking about not needing urologists in this world for men. Women need a specialist physician who can care for the things that are very particularly female.
On the topic of, you brought up general practitioners, because I think that's probably where women have the greatest access is to their general practitioner. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the amount of education that they actually get on this part of women's health, or the lack thereof?
Sure. It varies very significantly depending on where they trained and whether they're trained as internal medicine physicians or as family practitioners. Family practitioners probably receive a little more focus on women's health, and some of them can even do a women's health specialization. However, that's within the structure of a residency that also covers pediatrics and male health and a lot of other things. In terms of internal medicine, it's a 3-year residency, but again, they focus on adult medicine and all aspects of adult medicine. They have to manage hypertension. They have to manage diabetes. They manage a lot of things. And so while they will have some training in women's health, it is not the sole focus of the training that they get. And when you're talking about an OB-GYN physician, we spend 4 years in residency focusing exclusively on women's health. And we do rotations that vary from, obviously obstetrics and delivering babies and high-risk obstetrics. And we do women's oncology, so GYN oncology, which is ovarian cancer and uterine cancer. We do breast clinic time. We do, regular GYN time. We do office hours, and a lot of us even get some exposure to adolescent medicine. We do a lot of time worrying about and thinking about birth control and how to best manage that in all types of women and more high-risk women. And that's the only thing we focus on during the entirety of our residency over 4 years. So while primary care can do a lot of basic women's health care, they are not the specialized provider for that.
What population of women, or what women are most impacted by this shortage of OB-GYNs in your opinion?
I would say rural women. are most impacted. OB-GYNs tend to congregate in larger metropolitan areas. And the reason for that is complex. A lot of us do enjoy living in cities. That's part of it. A lot of it is financial. OB-GYN is one of the poorest reimbursed specialties there is. I'm not going to go into the whole politics of women's healthcare and why we get paid so badly. That's a topic for another podcast. But let's just say that, what we do is not paid well. And the thing that is most profitable for OB-GYNs, although it is not particularly profitable, it is probably the most reliable, is obstetrics. So the delivery of babies. And so for OB-GYNs to maintain a practice that is financially viable, they need to deliver a certain number of babies a year. And you can't do that in a rural practice. Often there just aren't as many obstetric patients in that area. I think there are a lot of great OB-GYNs who practice in rural areas, and they do it for the love of the specialty. And a lot of them do it in federally qualified health centers or other ways that they can perhaps make it financially viable. But there's a certain proportion of patients and deliveries that you need in order to make it worthwhile to be an OB-GYN somewhere. So really, rural women are the ones who are going to pay the price.
This shortage obviously has to impact OB-GYN well. What are the impacts that you feel? I'm sure you're feeling overtaxed. Generally, these specialists are busy. Give it to us from the perspective of an OB-GYN.
So I think from my perspective, the key things that I feel with this deficit are that, I spend a lot of time taking transfers in from far rural areas. Being in the Pacific Northwest, we do have a lot of rural areas. And these are patients being transferred in because there is no OB-GYN accessible to them. And so their primary care has attempted to do what they can for them, but realizes that they need a higher level of care. So we're spending money on ambulance, helicopter, and air flights for these women to get to an OB-GYN. I think that's a big impact and a waste of healthcare dollars that if we just, were able to support OB-GYNs and provide enough, might not need to happen. I find that women, when they get to me, are frustrated because, they've been through so many providers who've tried to do their best for them. It's not that these providers are bad at what they do or not doing their best. It's just they don't have the same level of expertise. And so they've been told multiple things and tried multiple things. And by the time they get to me, they're frustrated because they feel either there's no answer for them or that they're getting different answers. And it takes a lot longer for me to explain that it's not that the answers they've gotten previously are wrong. They were just first steps, and that we now need to move to a more specialized level of care. And it just takes a lot longer in that situation to care properly for a woman.
So let's switch to then solution. We've, kind of delved into the notion that there's a real shortage for so many women. Why is telehealth a great answer to this shortage of specialists?
I think telehealth holds promise for a couple of reasons. I think one of the biggest issues is you can talk to an OB-GYN specialist who is knowledgeable about the thing that you need to talk about. You can, a lot of what we do is face-to-face counseling. It's not reliant on an exam. It's not reliant on prescription even. It's just that women need to talk to somebody who understands what they're going through and can walk them through the process, give them reassurance where needed, talk to them about what things need to be followed up. And a lot of that can be done, just face-to-face over the computer. There are times at which, a prescription is needed or, exam or even a biopsy type thing might be needed, but that can be referred out. Or at least a woman then knows that she needs to go find the specialist who may not be available in her community. And it might be worth the trip in to see the specialist because she knows that, these are the things that need to be done.
Yeah. Well, and especially for women in perimenopause and menopause, that notion of a conversation is so important. Talk a little bit about that and how, video just really makes that an option for so many more women in terms of access.
Right. So in the perimenopause and in menopause itself, a lot of what women are experiencing is natural and normal, but can be frightening if you don't understand what's going on and why it's happening. And so a lot of the work I do as a menopause provider is counseling. It's just talking through symptoms and why they're happening, and, how long they may last, and if there's anything that needs to be done about them. A lot of women just really need reassurance as they're going through this process. The biggest thing I reassure women about is that this process will end. The perimenopause is not lifelong. It is a transitional time. It can be very crazy. It can be wacky for some women. When your hormones are fluctuating wildly, it can feel very, very different. But that will end. You'll go into a new normal, which is different than the old normal. And I can talk to them about natural remedies they might want to try. I can talk to them about diet and exercise and how those play into how a woman feels during this time. None of that requires a in-person visit. If a woman is really struggling and might need to consider hormone therapy, then it's worthwhile going to see an OB-GYN, and she goes in armed with the knowledge that she's tried some of these other things and they're just not sufficient, and she might need hormonal intervention.
Well, let's talk a little bit about prescription. How comfortable are you in terms of prescribing medication via telehealth? We see more and more of that happening, and especially for women in perimenopause and menopause, we're talking hormone replacement therapy.
So I think the ability to prescribe via telehealth is very much dependent on what we are prescribing. In terms of hormone replacement therapy, a lot of the conversation surrounding prescribing hormone replacement therapy relies on history and a woman's symptoms. It doesn't really rely that much on physical exam. And I am certainly comfortable prescribing a hormone to a woman who I feel I have a complete medical history on, who is getting regular and routine exams by her primary care physician. I don't need to do a specialized exam for that. The one thing that a woman would need to understand before getting hormones prescribed online is that there are side effects of hormones, and if any of these come up, she will need to see an OB-GYN perhaps for a biopsy. But that's pretty rare. And if she's using the hormones correctly, it really shouldn't become a big issue. So I think this is one area where telehealth prescribing is actually very beneficial. And we see that in other areas of telehealth where people are being prescribed birth control or things like that. I think the area where it's not as good is things like antibiotics for infections, because that does require more of a physical exam, which you can't do via video camera. And so I think, there are areas where it makes a lot of sense, and this is one of them. And there are areas where it really doesn't make sense, and you still need to be seeing a physician.
Obviously many women and people in general, but women are understandably nervous about entrusting their care to a video appointment. What would you say to a woman who's uncertain about telehealth?
I think the biggest point in establishing that level of trust is the conversation you have with a woman. If you're involved in conversing with her, if you've read her history forms, if you understand the problem that she's coming to you with, and if you listen, then they will feel comfortable. And, certainly women who think that this is a bad method of healthcare don't need to use it. They can go and find a physical physician to see. But that's not an option for a lot of women. And I think, just having the resource and being able to try it and feel comfortable with it reassures a lot of women. I think at Gynecologists, when we do our telehealth, one of the things that we do very well is we ask a lot of questions up front. They fill out a good health history form so that we know what we're dealing with. And then I explore that with them when we're face-to-face on the video camera. So I understand, do they have any risk factors? Do they have, medical problems I need to take into account? And I think they feel very reassured that I've read about them before I come into the phone call, and that we can discuss their issues face-to-face. And it really does feel like a face-to-face conversation. It's almost easier than when you go into the office, because a lot of times in the office, we're having to chart while we do things or write prescriptions or do all sorts of different things, and we're not necessarily looking at your face. Whereas on telehealth, really all we're doing is looking at you and talking.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a private conversation. You've obviously been conducting appointments. Talk a little bit about privacy and how women's, it is a one-on-one exchange. But talk a little bit about privacy, because that's probably the most kind of scary aspect of a video appointment.
Right. And I think the key thing for women to understand is that these video appointments and all the paperwork that goes with them does need to remain HIPAA compliant. So we have systems in place to keep these conversations private. They're not recorded. And then any documentation or paperwork that we send back and forth between each other is also protected, so that it is kept private between me and the patient. It's not shared with a bunch of different people. And that's really key in terms of maintaining that compliance for healthcare reportability. And I think women are worried that this is going out to lots of people. It's not. I am the only one seeing what they say. They are the only one seeing what I'm saying. And we do not record these visits for the future. It's a one-on-one conversation, just like you would have in the office.
Now, as Geneve's Director of Health, you've kind of truly been the visionary for establishing, a telehealth practice specialized around menopausal care. Talk a little bit about that vision. It's been a dream of yours. You've been doing it brick and mortar for a while locally. Talk a little bit about that vision, and it's finally really launching.
Yeah, I think the vision, from my perspective, I have been an OB-GYN practitioner in the Seattle area since 2005, and I was in Philadelphia before that. And, I love talking with women. And over the years, what's really become a passion of mine is menopause and perimenopausal care. And I think it's become a passion of mine because as my patients have aged, I've seen that is the area where they have the least information. We're very good at educating women about childbirth. We do a lot of education surrounding birth control because it's very important. But then we get into the perimenopause and there's just less out there. It's a non-reproductive time of life. And for a lot of, medicine's history, that's an unimportant time of life to the medical establishment. I think it's a very important time of life. Women have a lot more life to live in the perimenopause and the menopause. And properly approaching those times of life and those changes and understanding them completely helps a woman to live her best life through that time. And I love doing this face-to-face with my patients in clinic, but there are a lot more patients who need this education and who need providers who are specifically trained in menopause care. And there are very few of us in the country. There are, many of us have gone through the North American Menopause Society's certification program, and you can find those on their website. But, the likelihood of having someone with that certification near you is probably pretty low. It's just there aren't that many of us out there. And so being able to provide this to women all through the country is just an amazing opportunity. I know I've been doing the telehealth in our alpha testing. And one of the women I've been speaking with is from a very rural area of Washington. And there just isn't anybody out there who can answer these questions. And she's a little bit more medically complex. Perfect. This system is perfect for her because she can ask questions. None of them required a prescription. None of them required any testing. She just wanted to talk through some of the things she's going through, and telehealth is perfect for that. And I feel like being able to do that kind of good for women all over the country is just an amazing opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And in that circumstance, what would she typically do in the traditional healthcare system?
So, every area of the country is very different. In Washington, often what we see is these patients need to make appointments in Seattle. And so they need to drive 3 or 4 or 5 hours for each appointment. And each appointment may be 15 or 20 minutes. And then, if they have more questions, they have to drive back 3 or 4 hours in 3 or 4 weeks. Whereas this patient was able to talk to me 3 times from the comfort of her home and get 45 minutes worth of counseling and not have to go anywhere.
Yeah, and that's pretty amazing. The transition or the transformation, I think that will have for women like her.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
That's great.
And it's not useless to women in cities either. Even though people live in Seattle, there may be plenty of OB-GYNs around. Sometimes you just have a quick 10-minute question that you want to ask an OB-GYN about the perimenopause, and your OB's office is perfectly happy to see you, but it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks. Or, you just don't feel like it's enough that you want to leave your house and go into the office and do all that. You can just call into a telehealth service and ask the question and have it answered. And if they say, you know what, you really need to see your OB-GYN about this, then you go in. And if they say, nope, your question is answered, you're good, then you don't have to do that. So there's a great deal of usefulness for women everywhere in the country. I tend to focus on the rural areas because I'm in an area that's very underserved up here in the Pacific Northwest. But there are a lot of areas where this is helpful.
Well, that's, I think, super encouraging. And obviously, as a big believer in what Geneve's doing, I'm really excited about the notion of truly being this first ever online clinic for menopause care that makes it affordable to every woman and gives her the care and the access that she needs. So thanks for being my partner in it, Dr. Rebecca, and for bringing your expertise. I just am really excited about what this can bring to so many more women and to practitioners who are looking for alternative work opportunities.
I agree. A lot of the people who will be doing this type of telehealth are people who practice in a traditional office setting. I'm one of those people. And it just allows me to reach more women during off hours and times when maybe the office wouldn't be open, or, on post-call days when I'm at home anyway. And gives me an opportunity to talk to all sorts of women all over the state of Washington, which is really exciting for me.
Well, good. Well, for more information, women can come to genneve.com. That's genneve.com. We will be launching telehealth services state by state, and we will continue to add more states to our listing. So if your state is not in the states that we report today, sign up to our wait list, be part of that, so that as soon as we do have a practitioner in your region, we can get the word out to you and you can get on to a healthier life. So with that, thank you, Dr. Rebecca. Here we go and launching the first ever clinic for women in menopause.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast with Dr. Rebecca Dunsmoor-Su. If you'd like to learn more about Geneve's telehealth service and how you can set up a confidential appointment with a Geneve practitioner, go to genneve.com and sign up to join our community. As part of our community, you'll receive our weekly newsletter, which gives more information on how we're rolling out telehealth nationwide. Gyneve is the first of its kind online clinic for women in menopause. Take control of your health, have a healthier, easier menopause, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to the Gyneve podcast series. We welcome your feedback at genneve.com. That's genneve.com. You can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, and you'll never miss an episode. The Gyneve podcast series is produced by Shannon Perry, theme music by Smitty. And until next time, watch the Gyneve website for new stories and offers all dedicated to women's midlife health.